Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Vegas Chamber Situation webinar series. My name is Emily Cabaniag, Events Assistant Manager at the Vegas Chamber. To begin, please welcome Vegas Chamber Vice President of Membership, Jose Valle, for opening remarks.
Good morning, and on behalf of Mary Beth, thank you for joining us today, Situation Report webinar, for this important conversation. This series is designed to keep you informed and ahead of the curve on key policy developments affecting Nevada's business climate. We're proud to present today's session with the Kenny Guinn Center for Policy Priorities, an independent, nonpartisan organization conducting high-quality research on Nevada's most pressing policy issues. Today's conversation will focus on 4 critical topics that impact the health of our economy and your business. Federal funding in Nevada state budget will be number 1, housing affordability, number 2, health workforce, number 3, and finally, labor force participation rates. Whether you run a small business, lead a corporate team, or manage workforce development efforts, this briefing will help you better understand the policy landscape and what it means for your day-to-day operations and long-term planning. Introducing our panel, we are honored to welcome a distinguished panel of the Guinn Center experts. Jill Tolles, Executive Director, Todd Butterworth, Senior Research Analyst, Pierron, Tackes, Director of Health and Social Policy, Mark Krmpotic, Interim Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy, and Michael Stewart. Their research is helping shape evidence-based solutions to some of the state's biggest challenges. Today's discussion will include high-level data, practical insights, and key takeaways for Nevada's business leaders. Now, welcome our co-moderator, Managing Director at Hightower Las Vegas, and Chairman of the Vegas Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, one hell of a guy, Hugh Anderson.
Thank you, Jose. That's very kind of you. You're one hell of a guy, too.
Thank you, sir.
Jill and team, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. It is the last week of the legislative session, and as Jose mentioned, Mary Beth can't be with us because she's up there working the good fight with the rest of our GA team to make sure that good policy survives and bad policy dies. But before we get started with our guests, I want to highlight 2 powerful policy events at California Hotel and Casino in June. Join the Vegas Chamber for key insights and connections that shape the future of Nevada's business community. Number 1 is Eggs and Issues with Congresswoman Dina Titus on Monday, June 16th. Eggs and Issues connects Chamber members with federal leaders to discuss issues impacting Southern Nevada's economy. And believe it or not, at that hour of the morning, sometimes you will be surprised what you hear from our congressional delegation. Number 2 is our end of session legislative breakfast on Wednesday, June 18th. Gain a comprehensive update on the 2025 legislative session. Hear from Chamber leadership and our government affairs team about the bills that passed and what they mean for Nevada's employers and job creators. Register today at vegaschamber.com/events. Now we're going to turn it over to the Guinn Center team. Over to you, Jill, because we want to give you as much time as possible.
Thank you so much, Jose and Hugh. It's such an honor to be here. I've long been a fan of Chamber of Commerce, been a member actually in many different points in my career, and currently the Guinn Center is a member of this Chamber of Commerce, and we are so grateful to partner with you on being able to provide good quality evidence-based research. So we have a lot to cover today. It is my goal to speak as quickly as Jeremy Aguero and get through a whole lot of data. So I hope that you're well caffeinated. Hopefully you have a pen and paper. You can take down some of the information of our most recent research that we felt would be the most relevant to you and your world today. So without further ado, I'd like to dive in and share my screen with you. We are a data-driven, independent, nonpartisan policy research center. We are statewide, and we are affiliated with the University of Nevada, Reno, and have partnerships with UNLV, Boyd School of Law. And our mission is to advance evidence-based policy solutions for Nevada through research, public engagement like this, and partnerships. And a little bit of my background, I served for 3 terms in the Nevada legislature, and I looked to the Guinn Center as a central resource for factual data-driven independent research to help me make better decisions. And now it is our joy to be able to bring this to the public to make sure that our public is well informed on the most pressing issues in our state. And so we study everything from economic and fiscal policy, education policy, health and social policy. We've also done some work in natural land resources and land policy and hope to expand that area again. And then governance and civic policy through reports and briefs and explainers and infographics. I do this with an incredible team, and some of our members of the team are here with us today. We have Mike Stewart, who is our research director. He came to us after retiring from the state as the research director for the Legislative Counsel Bureau. And he oversees our research team, of which we have several members today. Pierron, Tackes, our director of health and social policy, who has both a law degree as well as a master's in public health. She's going to be talking a little bit more about our health workforce initiatives and other work that we're doing. Mark Krmpotic, our interim director of economic fiscal policy, who also spent 3 decades with the state, was senior fiscal analyst for the Senate before coming on board with us. We're so grateful for him. And Todd Butterworth, our senior education policy researcher. I'll remind you of their names at the very end, but we are also supported by other incredibly talented researchers that we get to work with every day on facts and solutions. And beyond that, we have research partnerships with our academic partners across the Nevada system of higher education at UNR, UNLV, Boyd School of Law. We've done work with the Desert Research Institute and other subject matter experts across the state that help to make sure that our research is academically rigorous but relevant to policymakers and to the public. So we wanted to focus on 4 areas that are impacting you and your people today, based on some recent research that we published this year on housing affordability, healthcare, jobs, and government, and how those decisions and how that environment impacts our world. So I'd like to start with one of our key research projects that we embarked upon over the interim and released early in the session this year, and that was on housing affordability in Nevada. This was a project that was requested by the governor's office and was funded by the Interim Finance Committee in the legislature. It was a robust, very deep dive into this topic in a pretty short period of time, where we tapped into experts across the state and even around the country to look at best practices. And some of the key findings from this study were that nearly half of Nevada's renters are excessively cost burdened, meaning that over 35% of their income is dedicated to paying for their rent. And interestingly enough, homeowners are not off the hook. A quarter of homeowners are also excessively cost burdened. Extremely low income households have fewer affordable units available than in any other state. What was an interesting takeaway for me as a consumer of this research is that the reason that we got here was due to 70 consecutive years of being the fastest growing state in the nation up until 2010. And we have remained near the top of fastest growing states in the nation since. And so as a result of that increased demand, and coupled with 2 major pauses on the supply, the recession, the Great Recession, and COVID, we have a supply side issue of not enough supply to meet this demand. And the state's income growth has lagged behind far behind housing costs, even in the counties with the highest income growth. So even where we've seen two times the increase in income growth, it's been 2.5 times the cost. Nevada has lost a considerable amount of skilled construction labor, and unfortunately, as of right now, is not well positioned to recover it, which means we need to have short, mid, and long-term solutions. Nevada is second worst in the nation in the number of apprenticeships for every 1,000 construction workers. Cities in Clark County in particular, which I know is relevant to you, are lagging in the construction of multifamily housing. Washoe County has been able to see an increase of 15% in that inventory, where our major municipalities in Clark County have lagged behind. And we look at solutions like zoning requirements and others that I'll get to in a moment. So just a few more data points for you to sink your teeth into. This one in particular, I know for Michael Stewart, our research director, was his key takeaway from the research that our annual median income for our top 5 occupations in Nevada can't afford, 4 out of the 5 can't afford a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment. So between food and prep, office and administrative support, transportation and material moving, sales and related, those occupations can't even afford the 1 to 2 bedroom apartments. So you can see where it can be a real crisis for a variety of your employees in our workforce. The other thing that was an interesting takeaway is tracking the trends that our developers have primarily focused on single family units or on large multifamily units in development. But where we've really lagged behind is in that missing middle inventory for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, making up only 7% of the market. And those are oftentimes the most attractive to families or for starter investments, starter homes for young couples, and it provides a greater flexibility for our workforce. So we need to expand that missing middle inventory. So what are some of the solutions that our research team came up with to provide to the governor and to the legislature? We put it into 6 different buckets. Land and infrastructure. Obviously, that is an ongoing topic, one that's been in the news quite a bit lately in regards to getting back some more of our federal lands to develop. And then a lot of area and emphasis on things that could be done around zoning requirements. And this can be addressed at the state level, but really at the state level, they're looking at, do we incentivize or do we penalize? Truthfully, the local jurisdictions do have these tools available in their tool belt to be able to incentivize reform, allow missing middle construction through upzoning, reducing parking requirements, or reducing minimum lot sizes or height restrictions, or even encouraging or getting out of the way of accessible dwelling units. And then there's many opportunities to streamline and expedite permitting processes to get that inventory on the line much faster. There's new technology that could be embraced to help to make that process more efficient, and some accountability measures to ensure that there's the right kind of turnaround time. And then you have the long-term planning of resource adequacy, looking at things like middle-income housing tax credits, expanding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, increasing our transferable tax credits and reducing impact fees, and then the long-term planning of bolstering Nevada's construction workforce through apprenticeships and other programs. And then we did focus primarily on supply side solutions because the research team came to the conclusion that that is the cause of the crisis that we're in. But there were some suggestions of potential demand side interventions, like expanding on successes from intentional landlord engagement programs that make tenants with the programs that are already available to them. And then working to increase Nevada's share of housing vouchers, which traditionally we have not taken advantage of due to archaic formulas where other states and jurisdictions are getting a much greater share. Nevada is lagging behind. So as you're thinking as a business owner, as a Chamber of Commerce member, some questions that you might consider is, how does the cost of housing impact your employees? What pressure does it put on wages to adjust for cost of living expenses? What is the impact of excessively cost-burdened customers on their spending habits, and just the overall impact on our economy, and why we think these solutions are so important? I'm really happy to report that Governor Lombardo's housing bill made it through the Assembly unanimously just yesterday, and we were able to present our research findings and our recommendations in time for this legislative session, that some of those recommendations were incorporated not only in Governor Lombardo's bill, but also in other legislators' bills that are making their way through the process. And we're tracking those, even though we don't lobby for or against specific legislation, we want to track how relevant our research is and what the impact of it is after this session. So I'd like to move on to another important topic impacting your employees, you and your businesses, and that is our access to healthcare. Having spent some time in the economic development space and over the last couple years and caring about this issue very much, we know that when employees are looking to relocate to a state, or when businesses are looking to relocate to a state, or when our businesses are looking to expand. Two of the questions they ask is, how healthy is our education system and how healthy is our healthcare? And so what we found is that we've made some progress over the last decade in increasing our health workforce. However, we still have a long way to go in order to be average with competing with other states across the nation. So in order to be average, we found that we really need over 2,000 more physicians, over 700 more advanced practice registered nurses, over 300 and almost 350 dentists, over 5,300 nursing assistants. And this one in particular is a shocking number, but almost 22,000 personal care and home health aides to meet the demands of our aging population. So I just want to show you a brief visual of what health professional shortages look like in our state. Approximately 2.2 million Nevadans, nearly 65% of the state's population, reside in a federally designated primary medical care health professional shortage area. So in Las Vegas, you can see we sit right in the middle there of, the scores can range from 1 to 25. Higher scores indicate greater priority. White or gray show that we're doing well in those areas. So when we're looking at health professional shortages, on our primary care health professionals, you can see that Las Vegas still has some area for growth. But moving into the dental healthcare space, this tells an even starker story that an estimated 1.9 million Nevadans, or 58.2% of the state's population, live in a federally designated dental health professional shortage area. And in 2025, an estimated almost 260,000 residents of rural and frontier Nevada, that's 82.5%, live in a dental HPSA. So even though you can see that there's a stark blaring purple shaded area in Clark County where we see a real shortage of dental health professionals, which impacts the overall health of the body. We see that it's a major issue in our rurals, which impacts our state lawmakers as they're making decisions about this issue. And then last but not least, an extremely pressing issue in our state today is our mental health crisis. And that is really illustrated here in this portrait, where it shows that 3 million Nevadans, or 91% of the state's population, reside in a federally designated mental health professional shortage area. And in 2025, and at over 300,000 residents, 100% of those living in the rural populations live in a mental health professional shortage area. And that has tremendous impacts on the social structure of our state, our health system, our criminal justice system, and our economy. So how did we get here? Well, because our population continues to grow, we have a greater aging population and diversification with diverse needs in Nevada. Also, it's due to our evolving population health trends and increasing chronic disease treatment and management needs. And then as more individuals in the state of Nevada have access to health insurance coverage, the good news is that they're seeking more help, but we don't have the providers to meet that demand. So what are some of the options that this brief laid out? I will preface that this brief was a preliminary brief. It is our intention and our hope, pending funding, that we will be able to do a deeper dive over this next interim. But the three major buckets that we tend to go to are growing our own workforce, where we can raise them up through our education system, stretching our existing workforce, which can come with some consequences to burnout that we're already seeing, and then recruiting and retaining healthcare workers from other jurisdictions, looking at things like interstate licensure compacts and reciprocity agreements. So as a business owner, as a member of the chamber, what are some questions that you might be asking? What is the cost, both economically for the state to the healthcare system, of doing nothing? And that's really the question that our state is grappling with. I am happy to report that the legislature, the governor, and philanthropic interests in our state are asking this question. And so it is our hope over the interim to be able to join together with our partners at UNLV, UNR, and elsewhere to dive deeply into how do we resolve this issue and why it's so important to deal with this from an economic argument. How does it impact your employees when they can't find healthcare providers? And oftentimes they say if you're sick, the best place to go is out of state. So what impact do those absences due to chronic illness, behavioral health, or substance use issues have on your workforce and your business? So moving on, and we're going to spend a little bit quicker pace on these last two reports, but they're really important, particularly in your business and world. And that is taking a look at the dynamics of labor force participation rates in post-pandemic Nevada. Now, this is a two-part research project spanning 2 years based on a grant that we received from the Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. And we partnered with the University of Las Vegas's Lee Business Centers for Business and Economic Research. And they were wonderful partners to work with as we dove into the demographics and data behind answering the question, why was Nevada the third largest drop in the nation in labor force participation after COVID? Meaning people left the workforce and in some cases left the state and did not return. And what we found after the pandemic from 2019, comparing those numbers to 2022, was that Nevada had 10,900 fewer workers in the labor force. And one of the things that we hear from businesses constantly is the frustration with the ability to build their workforce with qualified individuals. And so this tells a little bit of that story. And I encourage you, along with all of our research, to go on our website, guinncenter.org, download the reports. There's so much data. It's too much to cover in the time that we have today. But out of that 10,900 workers that we lost, an estimated 10,800 workers were in the leisure and hospitality sector. That's particularly salient considering the fact that 1 in 5 Nevadans work in leisure and hospitality. And in Clark County, 1 in 4 Nevadans work in leisure hospitality. So just a major exodus from this critical economic driver in our state. Something that was very interesting that surprised our research team was that married males experienced the largest decrease in labor force participation rate, while females experienced an increase. And so that draws some questions around access to childcare or remote work and how that's shifted and changed the gender participation in the workforce. The mean age of people leaving Nevada has grown progressively younger in recent years. So we see a lot more of our senior population moving in, a lot more of our younger population seeking jobs elsewhere, and we're losing that talent. And then data suggests that decreases were due to early retirement, difficulty finding childcare, and jobs that were temporarily or permanently eliminated. I want to dig into this area of remote work because it's one that's so uniquely interesting and one that we think has a bit of an impact on that male-female divide that we saw. So what we noticed was that more females engaged over 2021 and 2022 in remote work, and more males also engaged, but at a lower rate. But we're still not keeping up with trends in the United States, in other states where they're embracing remote work more, and that may be the nature of our economy and the needs of our workforce. But it's an interesting area to explore more and expand. So this trend suggests that some dual income households in Nevada may have transitioned to single income households during COVID and did not return. Factors like government assistance played a role. They were able to stay out of the workforce longer. And so we're going to continue to track this to see how it trends over time. Reduced expenses due to lower interest rates had an impact perhaps during that period of time, and need for childcare due to daycare and school closures contributed. If you want to see some more, we'll point to Purdue University, which discussed the lasting impact of these disruptions on women in particular and low-wage workers in greater detail. So what are some policy considerations when we talk about these kinds of issues? And Todd Butterworth is your expert on the call. I recommend that you ask him some follow-up questions after this, as is Pierron Tackes on the health workforce space. But some of the policy considerations that the team came up with was Always back to education as the builder of our pipeline for our labor force, and looking at things like career and technical education, building off of the successes already seen in Nevada as well as around the states. And then post-secondary workforce development. How do we re-engage in upskilling our existing workforce and getting them into higher paid, higher wage earning positions? And then some other unique hiring strategies, tapping into the often untapped resource of people with disabilities, that we have a plethora of people willing to work and more than able that we could be utilizing to build out our workforce. And then looking at workforce development strategies like bolstering our apprenticeships and then bringing on youth opportunities. You may have seen in the news, there's a lot of alarms being raised around how AI is replacing some of those entry-level positions, but there's still a place for being able to build that workforce and maybe some creative solutions for incentivizing that. I know first thing I did when I turned 16 was go right down to the DMV for my 9 a.m. appointment, get my driver's license. The next thing I did after school was go to the mall, pick up 11 applications and go get myself a job. And those first jobs are really important as part of that workforce pipeline, and looking at creative solutions to incentivize that. And then finally, economic diversification is always a conversation in Nevada about how do we continue to provide opportunities so our young people aren't going to school and then leaving and not coming back, or going out of state to get trained and then not coming back. We need to build that pipeline for the long-term sustainability and health of our economy in the state of Nevada. So diversifying through areas like IT and logistics, natural resources, transportation, creative arts, and then advanced manufacturing, among many. So what are some questions for you to consider as employers? How have remote work policies affected your business? Do childcare challenges impact your employees? How can workforce development programs and upskill training opportunities help you expand your workforce? And have you considered tapping into the underutilized population of adults with disabilities? Last but certainly not least, we have a lot going on, if you haven't noticed, in the federal government and under this administration that is impacting our federal funding. And so the Guinn Center, we're not here to take one side or the other, but rather to pull out the relevant facts so that we can ask the questions about where does that federal funding where do those federal funding dollars go in the state of Nevada? What programs could be impacted if there are cuts? And what are the questions that policymakers could be asking? And so we put together a brief analyzing the federal footprint, a snapshot of federal funds used in Nevada state. And some of the key takeaways are that nearly 80% of federal funding in Nevada supports Department of Health and Human Services programs, DHHS, Medicaid, Children's Health Insurance Program, and various public health and behavioral services. 1 in 4 Nevadans are enrolled in Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program. Definitely a topic at the federal level and something that all of our legislators and the governor's office are talking about. And other key recipients include the Departments of Transportation, Education, Training, and Rehabilitation, Department of Education, and Agriculture. So when we look at our state budget in this current biennium, it's important to realize that 27.7% of our state budget is federally funded. So you can see that that's a very large chunk, and that those changes at the federal level will have some impacts at the state level. We're already seeing some of that, but we want to know exactly where does the funding go so we can ask the right questions if and when more cuts come down the way. And so what the team did was dive deeper into the top 5 departments that are relying on federal resources. So Health and Human Services, as you can see, makes up the lion's share at 80%. Then Transportation, Education, Agriculture, and as I said, the Department of Employee Training and Rehabilitation. And then the other departments make up that final remainder. So diving into what you can find in this brief, and I highly recommend everyone take a look at it. Go again to guinncenter.org and you can download the whole brief. But one of the most valuable tools that's available in this brief is the appendix, where our research team, primarily Mark Krmpotic and Pierron, did a deep dive into exactly where do those dollars go, because many taxpayers are asking the question, is there waste, fraud, and abuse? Where does that federal money go? Who are the recipients of those programs? And so we actually gave you line item by line item, so you can look for yourself to see where those dollars go and what programs potentially could be affected if there are cuts. And so once again, I would encourage you to take a look at each of those line items, and then also keep an eye out for a follow-up brief that we hope to publish later this summer, where we're going to look at who are the recipients of those grants. Oftentimes, they're private partnerships and nonprofits like your United Way or Catholic Charities, Volunteers of America, various literacy programs. So we're hoping to do a deeper dive to take a look at who's receiving those programs, which begs the question, if those grant dollars were to go away, how would those nonprofits continue to deliver those services? Or would the state be liable because of certain constitutional or statutory requirements to still provide those direct services, but without their nonprofit or private partners that oftentimes can do that at a lesser rate than it would cost for state or county employees to conduct those services? And do we have the pipeline? So stay tuned for that. It's an important topic. So some of the questions you might want to think about is, do you know what services your employees and customers may utilize that are currently funded by these programs, i.e. Medicaid, Title I schools, et cetera? Has your organization been impacted by any cuts to programs? Curious minds would like to know. Feel free to reach out to us afterwards with any questions that you might have or interest in future studies. And then what options does the state have if funding for certain programs is cut? Again, what are the constitutional or statutory requirements to still meet some of those direct service needs? And what is that going to mean in terms of cuts in other areas of the state or potentially having to pursue new revenue sources? And how might that impact your employees, your customers, or your business? So these are definitely things that we want to be informed about and engaged as those discussions continue to happen at the federal and state level. So in summary, just a few of Jill's top takeaways, and then I'm so excited to pass it off to our team of experts so you can ask all of your deeper dive questions. Housing affordability is a supply side problem is what the research team found primarily, and there are accessible solutions in the short term and long term at both the state and the local level. And I'm happy to say that some of those are currently making their way through the legislative process. The health workforce will take time to turn around. We've made some great progress, but the cost of doing nothing is too great to let it continue on the path that it is. Labor force participation is down in hospitality, but diversifying our economy, expanding workforce development programs, and utilizing our untapped workforce are ready solutions. And cuts in federal spending could shift more cost to the state and greatly impact services to our population. So with that, I just want to take a moment to pass the baton. I think I've gone over a few minutes. Apologize for that. So looking forward to hearing all of your questions for our research team. Again, want to introduce our research director, Michael Stewart, our director of health and social policy, Pierron, our interim director of economic and fiscal policy, Mark Krmpotic, and our senior policy researcher, Todd Butterworth. And if each one of them could just share really briefly, introduce themselves, and share just a quick little one bullet point about their background, and then we'll open it up, pass the baton back to you to open up for questions. Mike, would you like to just say a couple words of introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jill, and thank you everybody on this call. We appreciate the opportunity. My name is Michael Stewart. I'm the research director here at the Guinn Center. My background, as Jill mentioned earlier, has been in state service. I spent 27 and a half years with the state, a little bit with the Secretary of State's office doing elections policy, but the bulk of that, over 25 years with the Nevada Legislative Council Bureau, working my way up as a policy analyst, and then eventually retiring as the research director, and which is a wonderful place to be. But upon retirement, the Guinn Center was a perfect place to land for someone who's been doing nonpartisan policy research his entire career. So I'm happy to be here. and lead this amazing research team that we have here at the Guinn Center. Now I'll turn it over to Pierron next.
Great, thank you. I'm Pierron Tackes. I'm the Director of Health and Social Policy. As Jill mentioned, I have a dual competency background. I'm a licensed attorney, and I also have a master's of public health. I've spent about the past 8 years practicing public health law. Most recently, I was the Senior Deputy Attorney General for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. So I represented the state health department. I also have experience working at the federal level with the CDC on global health and the EPA on water enforcement. So I'm really excited to be at the Guinn Center to apply all my practical experience into policy research and developing more effective laws to address health and social policy issues. And I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mark Krmpotic. I serve as the Interim Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy with the Guinn Center. I've been with the Guinn Center off and on for a couple of years. Prior to that, I served in state government for just over 30 years, the last 21 years with the Legislative Council Bureau. And of that period of time, the last 11 years as a Senate fiscal analyst, and in that role was directly involved and responsible for putting together the legislatively approved budget for the state. Over that period of time, served a couple of special sessions to address budgetary shortfalls, notably associated with the Great Recession, and then at the end of my period of time with the COVID recession.
I guess that leaves me. My name is Todd Butterworth. I've been a senior research analyst with Guinn Center for 2 years. My focus is on education, though I've also done some work in the realms of human services and the economy. Previously, I worked 20 years with Nevada's Department of Health and Human Services, creating and managing programs for people with disabilities. And then I spent 7 years as a nonpartisan policy analyst for, once again, the Legislative Council Bureau. And my focus there was on education. So it's great to be here with you today, and we can move forward, I guess, with our Q&A.
Well, don't
Terrific.
go, Todd, because the first question is for you.
All right, let's do it.
So what are the biggest takeaways from your research on Nevada's labor force participation? And what should business owners be thinking about when it comes to hiring and retention? So if you think back a few years, there was this enormous concern about where are they, where did they go? We can't get them back into the slots we have to as the economy recovers. And now we've got a certain amount of debatable economic weakness in the state as well as around the country. And employers are reticent to shed jobs, but they also may not be feeling so sanguine about that they're right-sized for the coming economic volatility. Give us a few thoughts on that front.
Thanks. You know, Hugh, I think it's natural to form opinions about things based on the barrage of information that we now encounter every day. But one of the cool things about our work at the Guinn Center is we can look to the data to get a closer approximation of what the real story is. So my biggest takeaways after diving into the data compiled by our friends at UNLV were, one, obviously that Nevada's labor force participation was really slow to rebound from the pandemic. Two, as Jill highlighted, literally 99% of the workforce reduction in Nevada during the pandemic came from the leisure and hospitality industry, as people retired early, shifted to other industries, or left the state because of affordability or opportunity issues. And then the third thing is that the Nevadans were a little less prepared to take advantage of new economy opportunities that were emerging, things like remote work, because our dominant hospitality and retail sectors haven't required much post-secondary education. You know, Nevada has historically had a pretty strong and resilient economy, but the post-COVID data reveals some really important structural weaknesses, namely a lack of economic diversification and a workforce that is underprepared to pivot professionally. I don't want to open a can of worms, but this second point could be really significant in a wave of job displacement brought on by artificial intelligence. And that appears to be coming our way in the next few years.
I don't know how you looked at my notepad, but that's exactly what I was going to ask you to raise. So, the folks participating on this call are predominantly employers. So what opportunities or programs are available to them to identify resources so they can look at their existing employee base and say, look, we need to evolve you so the business can continue to exist and evolve, and what should they be looking for as they need to identify new employees to expand the business going forward? What resources are available to them?
Yeah, so I'd like to highlight a couple of things to maybe stir folks' creative juices where their workforce is concerned. The data show that one of the most underleveraged opportunities is the talent pool of Nevadans with disabilities. This might be a little counterintuitive, but there are state-supported programs and federal tax incentives that can help businesses to recruit, prepare, and retain these workers. The state's Voc Rehab Agency is essentially a free human resources operation that very few employers are taking advantage of. And second, experience from other states and nations in our research shows there's a tremendous opportunity for a symbiotic relationship between Nevada's employers and its education system, both high school and higher ed. Our report looks closely at the interesting case of Switzerland, Switzerland of all places. This country actually has a lower percentage of adults with bachelor's degrees than Nevada, and that's saying something. But its per capita GDP is 70% higher than Nevada. So why is this? It's because young people in Switzerland leave high school either well prepared for college or with multiple years of vocational apprenticeship already under their belt. Industry partners in Switzerland essentially serve as a supplementary teaching force, which in a state like Nevada with a teacher shortage could be a real difference maker. But those industry partners are also in the process able to mold their future workforce. And I think most importantly, kids are excited about going to school because they're doing stuff that's interesting and they're being treated like the adults that they aspire to become. Hugh, there's no shortage of good school to work models. The challenge is in identifying and investing in the ones that match Nevada's current, but also targeted economic sectors.
Excellent. Thanks, Todd. Jose?
Very, very good. Ms. Tackes, you're on deck. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, we have 2 questions/suggestions that came in. So I'm going to read both of them for you. The first one is, how about increasing the slots for international dental students? It used to be 8. Now it's set at 12, and thousands of international dentists apply for these slots at UNLV Dental School. That's number 1. Part 2 is, also, how about leveraging U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. commercial service programs in cooperation with the U.S. State Department to attract more international medical staff into the state? International Trade Administration, U.S. Commercial Services, has an office in Las Vegas at the top of the regional West Rural Export Center, headquartered in Las Vegas to support Nevada businesses and educational institutions. I feel like you might have written this question yourself.
I love these comments, so thank you for who sent this in. I want to talk first about the international student piece. So this is something we're really interested in looking at when we look at our broader study of what can move the needle on bringing the workforce into Nevada. So when we're talking about workforce development, it's not something that Nevada is experiencing in a vacuum. Most states are experiencing shortages in health workforce. So we're competing against other states for these same healthcare providers. So we want creative approaches that are going to work here specifically in Nevada. And I think looking at the international students and the international professionals is going to be a great avenue of studying, can Nevada effectively implement policies that's bringing in professionals beyond the United States. So talking about the dental school, I think this is really creative. UNLV is one of the most internationally diverse universities in the country. So if we can expand the pipeline in Nevada to those students and then retain those educated dentists here in Nevada, that'll really affect our dental health. And I want to just quickly plug, Jill mentioned this, why we're including dental health in this study is, yes, we want our Nevadans to have bright, shiny teeth, but it's also closely tied to overall health. So dental health, oral health is closely tied to cardiac health. So improvements in access to dental health we've seen reduced rates of cardiac events, of stroke, of heart disease. So this is impacting your employees, not just in having clean teeth, but also in being productive, non-absent employees. And then speaking to the suggestion of the U.S. Department of Commerce, I do just want to mention one of the programs that Nevada already does have in place is the J-1 visa program, which employs licensed professionals that are international professionals to work in these high shortage areas. There's a recent news event that program has been temporarily paused. So new interviews have been paused. It doesn't affect our current J-1 visa holders, but is something that Nevada should be thinking about of maybe we do want to shift to recruiting students so that we can license those professionals here in the state. Great question.
Wonderful. Excellent. So a follow-up, for employers offering health benefits, what trends or upcoming changes should we be preparing for in Nevada's healthcare policy landscape?
Great. So generally, there's expected to be an increase in health insurance costs of about 6%, depending on what you're looking at, in 2025. Nevada is looking at approaches to reduce or mitigate those increases in premiums. So one that's extremely topical, there was a hearing on this bill this week, but it's the governor's proposal to restructure the Department of Health and Human Services. And I'll just quickly plug, the Guinn Center does have an explainer brief on this proposed split. It's a high-level overview of what's been proposed and how those programs will be sorted. But generally, the proposal is to pull out certain programs from DHHS and put them in a separate agency, the Nevada Health Authority. And what will be situated there is Medicaid, the Silver State Health Insurance Exchange, the PEB program, all of the programs where Nevada is the buyer of health insurance. And the hope is that they can combine purchasing power to reduce those premiums that are passed down to Nevadans. So that's currently before the legislature. It's something to really keep our eye on as far as how it'll affect insurance for Nevadans. And then the other thing that I think is worth mentioning and is topical and something that we should all be keeping an eye on as far as health insurance premiums is Nevada's public option. So this was enacted by the legislature in 2021, but it's set to go into place in January of 26. So the latest on that is that the state of Nevada will be offering these battle-born state plans through the Nevada Health Exchange to individuals purchasing health insurance at reduced premiums. Those plans have been approved as recently as January of this year and are still set to go into place in January of next year. So will be an option for individuals purchasing insurance.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Mr. Anderson, back to you, sir.
So Mark, how does federal funding in the Nevada state budget directly affect local businesses? It sounds like a 30,000-foot problem, but the reality is how does our membership get directly affected when federal funding gets reduced or dries up?
Thank you very much for the question. So I think about, in terms of direct effect, those businesses that might provide services, products or services to the state where those products or services are funded with federal funds. And you can think of something as very basic as building maintenance, pest control, HVAC services, landscaping, and so forth on buildings that are owned primarily by the Department of Health and Human Services, where federal funding plays a large part in their overall operating costs. I also think about the Department of Transportation and businesses that may contract or subcontract for construction work. The state highway funding projects leverage a good portion of federal funds to fund those construction projects throughout the state. And then I think also about providers of services in the healthcare and rehabilitation space under the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. And there are small businesses in the state, in Las Vegas and so forth, that provide services for direct clients of these agencies.
So along those lines, and this is a very, very unfair question, but we're going to throw it at you. Given the current economic outlook, which changes by the minute, what steps can small and mid-sized businesses take to make sure that they can stay aligned with these broader fiscal policy measures? How can they defend themselves? And again, I know it's not fair because it's changing too dramatically, but given the hope that at some point it's going to settle down at some level, what's the best course of action for them?
So primarily keeping abreast to the best of their ability of those changes that are taking place. We know that the big, beautiful bill passed the House. It's being considered by the Senate. There may be impacts to small businesses in terms of their employees that may be covered under the Medicaid program, for instance, or if they perhaps were receiving assistance through the SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. I also understand that there may be some approach to putting the DOGE cuts into legislation and reducing the budget for the current fiscal year if that ends up taking place. And so if I'm a business that performs consistent services for the state, I want to try to understand to the best of my ability how those services may be funded by the state. If I'm under contract with the state, need to realize that most of the state's contracts have funding out clauses, meaning that if the funding goes away, the contract ends. And so I'm going to attempt to learn more about the business that I do with the state and whether that's federal funded and how I may be impacted if that federal funding goes away. And so I can react accordingly.
Thank you. Mr. Jose.
Thank you. All right. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I want to come back to you, Ms. Tolles, if we can for a second. First of all, Jeremy, we would be very proud of you guys. You were quick on pace, great energy, and fantastic information. So very well done. 2 questions for you. The second to the last is, what are some actionable ways local businesses can engage with the Guinn Center's research to support smart, data-driven policy?
Thank you so much for that question, and thanks for your comments as well.
Of course.
You know, I think that it's a perfect follow-up question to what Mark just addressed, which is that right now it's so important to have sound facts and data and to be informed, to cut out the noise and maybe move past the headlines to look at just the real facts and figures, and to engage with our representatives in informed ways, to share as constituents what you find are the impacts on your business, on your employees, on the economy, on your sector, because they need those real data points and those real stories in order to help them make more informed decisions. But you lose all credibility if you're pointing to just something that you grabbed off of social media that doesn't have the evidence behind it. So we see ourselves as a critical contributor to this discussion to make sure that we have a responsibility to inform you with vetted information to help you then represent your needs to your representatives who are there to make better decisions on your behalf and represent you at both the local, state, and federal levels. And I will say, as a former legislator, the power of real constituent testimony is crucial in helping to make better decisions and to fight on your behalf. And so when you come forward credibly with the right facts and compelling stories, it helps your representatives represent you better. So I would encourage you to go to guinncenter.org. I would encourage you to make sure that you get on our email newsletter list so that you are keeping up to date with the latest releases of reports and activities that we're promoting the information in the community. And always feel free to reach out to us with your ideas of what you think are the most pressing policy issues in the state to research and questions that you have, and we can direct you to our experts on our team.
Terrific. So I'm going to ask you a very specific question here. Many of our members come to us with two big issues. One of them is workforce. I can't get people to show up to work. And the second one is once I get them there, it's hard to be able to help them afford living in Las Vegas now. So the specific question is, how can Nevada's business communities collaborate with policy leaders to drive solutions on housing and workforce shortages that are impacting our businesses?
Well, the good news is you know that you can trust that there is vetted, quality, data-driven information. And when we do have recommendations in our reports, they are based on evidence of return on investment, what's worked elsewhere, what's worked historically. So taking that information to your legislators, to your congressional delegation, and asking them to consider moving forward policy, either proposing that policy or voting to support it, will go a long way to see us move the needle. And that's what motivates us every day to do the work that we do.
Get informed and get involved.
Exactly. Wonderful way to summarize it.
Excellent. Okay, so Jill, Mark, Pierron, Todd, Michael, and of course, Mr. Hugh Anderson, thank you for sharing your time, insights, and continued commitment to Southern Nevada's business community. Your experience has helped us better understand the key policy areas shaping our future. To all the attendees, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on the next Situation Report. Have a great day.
Today's Vegas Chamber webinar. Stay engaged, stay informed, and we'll see you at the next Vegas Chamber event.